mixed martial arts. Mixed martial arts. How do we like our martial arts? We like them down under. Yeah! Woo! Yeah, 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 yeah! Woo!
Wow. Casey bringing the energy. Didn't see the hyped yelling coming from you, Casey, but why wouldn't you yell? We got fights this weekend. 48 hours from now, a long-awaited grudge match goes down in Perth, Australia, down under. Throw another shrimp on the barbie and let's settle in, because this is the UFC 305 preview show, everybody. Woo! Hi, Casey. Hi, everybody. I'm Jed Meshew, MMAfighting.com. Great website. And you know the deal. We were just on BTL a couple hours ago, and we're back again. We're doing a little early this week. We've got some conflicts tomorrow, so we had to get it in. And of course, as always, Mike Heck is joining me. This time, Boston Mike, here to deliver his own hot takes. Mike, how we doing?
Sorry. Let me change hats. There we go.
That's right. You got to get Boston Mike.
Now we're ready. How we doing? I'm excited. Pundit Mike is back for, I think, the second time this week, and ready to talk UFC 305. Let's go.
We always love to have Pundit Mike. Pundit Mike is just liberating. He's very exciting. Gets to, unbutton the collar, let his hair down, metaphorically, of course. And, as we talked about in BTL, breaking news. I'll be taking over the MMA hour, so I get some reps in the big chair here. It's going to be terrifically exciting as we get some more hosting reps for me. And, of course, as always, joined on these things. You've heard him already. He apparently is extremely excited. The baddest stash, the baddest producer, the man who just refuses to wear sleeves, Mr. 3027 himself, Casey Leiden.
Let's go. Let's go. 30-24.
That's right, 30-24. It's tough to keep track. There are too many nicknames for you, Mr. Leiden. But fellas, we know why we're here. Chatters, we know why we're here. It's UFC 305 this Saturday, Perth, Australia, RAC Arena. Main event, long-awaited, kind of highly anticipated fight between the current champion, Dricus du Plessis, former two-time champion, Israel Adesanya. If Izzy wins, he will become the first person to win 3 titles in the same weight class since Randy Couture. It will be just the two of them in their own special little club. And obviously, if Dricus wins, he will consolidate his reign, et cetera, et cetera. We'll get to all of that in a minute. First, let me just remind you, open chat. We'll do a little Q&A at the end. We've already kind of done one today, but we'll do another one. So if you've got questions, fire them in. Super chats get priority. We'll get to that at the end. But I have a question for you, Mike. We're starting right at the top. It's hard for me to ask this question because I normally don't get to ask you this question, Mike. You ask me, hey, what's the Michelin star system? What's the FART system here? AK, what's the gymnastics score? Mike, I need some kind of a scoring system from you for this card. We yet to see it from you, so I need you to dig into the bag and pull out a way to rate this card comparatively.
Was not prepared for this. So I'm just going to keep this very simple. We'll do a 1 to 10 scale here, the hex scale, if you will. I think this is a solid 8.1. I think the main event is so good that it puts it over the top. I like the rest of the main card too. Kai Kara-France Steve Erceg is a banger. Gamrot Hooker is really interesting considering what's on the line, especially for Dan Hooker and Mateusz Gamrot as well. Tai Tuivasa, Jairzinho Rosenstruik, perfect matchup for both guys because neither of them are going to try to take down the other. And then we get the return of the Leech, which should be a fun fight and probably won't go to the scorecard. So the prelims aren't spectacular. There's just some things that, like Junior Tafa, Walter Walker, I believe is the featured prelim. I mean, who's making these decisions? Because that is a very real chance of being a heavyweight over and not the best way. And then
Battle
there's
of
some
the brothers.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of brothers on this card. Alex
We've got
Reyes.
4 of them, Mike. We've got 4 of
Yes.
them.
Herbert Burns. There's a lot of squash matches on here. I mean, I think it's gonna be like a fun watch, but it's solid. The main card's good. The main event is incredible. Prelims are kind of what they are. I think this would be a good time. 8.1.
8.1 seems a fair approximation for this. For those dying to know, because I'm sure you all are, this is a 1 Meshew star card. It doesn't rise to 2. For those unaware of the system, it's 3 stars is the max. 3 stars is you would take a special trip to see this. 2 stars, you take a short trip to see it. 1 star, you're not going anywhere, but if you are from Perth, you will attend. And I think this unequivocally clears that bar. If I'm in Perth on Saturday, what better thing to do than watch the main event? But we've kind of talked about this behind the scenes a little bit. I don't think I've said it on air. If, knock on wood, something were to happen and the main event fell out of this card, it would be a catastrophe. This card would go from being very, very like worthwhile to, okay, we're looking at a new minimum buys rate being established here. And so it is very top heavy. The main card has a bunch of good stuff, but then the rest of it kind of is, Australian Kiwi fighters doing stuff a bit like a Bellator. So good card, not a great card, perfectly fine pay-per-view. I think I said on BT, not on BTL actually. I think I said on No Bets Barred this week, if it had one more, if instead of the Li Jiangling Carlos Prates fight, which I love, but if that fight's not a main card fight and instead we have another title fight of some fashion and the main card's being opened by Tai Tuivasa, then I think we're talking 2-star territory. But still, it's going to be a pretty good Saturday. And so let's dive into the Saturday, Mike, because we haven't talked a lot about this on the Q&A we just did on BTL. There actually weren't a ton of questions about 305. And I've got a lot of big ones, including, Casey, you read my mind because pre-show you said something, Casey, and is the first question I have to talk about here. What you said was, I'm not really feeling it. I'm not, I don't have the energy. And I got to say, this does not feel like as big an event, as excited as I should be for a fight. It was very high on my list. So Mike, is that the case? Do you feel this is kind of going by a little quieter than anticipated? And if so, why?
I mean, there's a couple of different reasons. This one definitely is under the radar in a lot of respects. One, because the time difference, especially here in the US, is insane. Like media day started at, I think, 10 p.m. Eastern and then rolled into early this morning. And then the open workouts happened. And poor Casey was up, doing all the uploads and all the video editing and probably went to bed after I woke up this morning. So that's part of it. So you have to play a little bit of catch up, and a lot of people have to work. So it's really hard to play catch up. The other thing is the rivalry between Izzy and DDP has been there, but it has quieted a bit because this fight should have happened in September or late last year. But instead the UFC wanted to play let's just make this fight bigger. Let's have Izzy go out there and thump Sean Strickland. And then Sean Strickland said, nope, I'm going to go in there and spoil all the plans. And then DDP beat Sean in a really competitive, really close fight. And we haven't seen Izzy in over a year. Normally we have Izzy fighting in this amount of time. Izzy's probably fought 2 or 3 times between the Strickland fight and this one. So I think that's just kind of some rarefied air there. And then the other thing is, and I think this actually fits into this conversation, this card would be so much better and it would feel so much bigger if we didn't have UFC Vegas 95. That just, like if UFC fanhood was a beach ball, UFC Vegas 95 just sucked the life right out of that beach ball. And this beach ball is impossible to blow up. So we're spending all this energy trying to blow it back up so we could bring it to the pool and play some volleyball with it. Just don't have it right now. I think it's like mid-inflated at this point. But UFC Vegas 95 really hurt it because usually those fight night cards are usually a compelling main event, gives you a chance to tune in to watch, and they play all the promotional packages to get you ready for this card. But nobody friggin' watched UFC Vegas 95 because it was a disaster on paper. Had they just not done a card at all, which, by the way, it's okay to take a Saturday off. It really, truly is, to let these things build up and permeate. I think if we didn't have a card last week, this one would feel much bigger.
That's a great point. I made something similar earlier this week. I know that they love a go home show. Even though it's hard to call even Vegas 95 a go home show, kind of given what we're doing. But like, I think taking a week off before every pay per view would just be a huge benefit to building anticipation because the cycle is so back to back. Because as soon as Sunday comes, Sunday will be all right. We're talking 305 stuff, and then by Tuesday of next week, at the absolute latest, we're on to the next one, whatever it is, the Cannoneer thing. Like there, it's just so relentless. I would say giving a week off beforehand, because if just right now we were starting to settle into okay, big fight week, and we've got this Saturday off, there's PFL, there's other things. Then by next Saturday, if that's when this was happening, I think we'd be feeling it a little bit. But the other thing that you said, and I kind of want to circle back to, how much has Sean Strickland kind of killed the momentum for this fight? Because not just beating Izzy in the way he did and kind of sending Izzy out, even the Dricus du Plessis Sean Strickland fight that happened in January, and no one talks about it, no one really thinks about it. And so is that like one of the reasons is sort of Sean Strickland and kind of where these performances are at? Has that kind of stunted what's happening this week for us?
I think there's a piece of that. And I think it's also because we are living in this different kind of a world, right? Where it's not always the meritocratic decision. There are a lot of people really, and I still get calls like this on Heck of Morning. There are a lot of people who are pissed that Israel Adesanya is coming back to a title fight after losing this fight. He's lost 2 out of 3, and you can make probably a stronger case that Leon Edwards deserved an immediate rematch before Israel Adesanya. I understand why they're doing it, because at this point, if you don't do it now, you're just going to lose this fight altogether. It's a very real chance that you lose this fight between DDP and Izzy altogether. And I think the UFC is kind of kicking themselves for booking the Strickland fight in general, because you should just went right to this. Even if you just benched Izzy until January and did the card there and did that fight there, I think this would have been a huge deal. Just so much time has passed. And then the DDP Strickland fight was so close. There are so many people who feel Sean Strickland won that fight, that DDP shouldn't even be the champion right now. And then there's all this talk about the rest of this division. It almost seems like people have fast forwarded the calendars. They're looking more at Robert Whittaker and Khamzat Chimaev and the impact of that fight, more so than this one, which is kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, the Strickland thing and having him win the belt and then having that super close fight with DDP that a lot of people thought he won. Yeah, I think it's taken a little bit of meat off the bone here. And again, a lot of people aren't overly thrilled that Izzy is getting the shot. I don't mind it because, like I said, you have to do it now, but I think that's a part of the problem as well.
I never thought about that because I haven't really seen a lot of pushback to Izzy getting the shot. You know me, like I'm very anti immediate rematches for losses. And this isn't an immediate rematch, but it's the same tenor, right? Like he's getting another title fight despite getting whomped by Sean Strickland. I haven't once thought about it because, like, who else is there? Like, the only other option is a immediate Sean Strickland rematch. I guess it wouldn't be immediate at this point. Strickland has since gone on to consolidate, but like, are we all itching to see DDP versus Strickland too? Because, like, if you believe Sean Strickland won, I think that he has a very clear case to have won. I don't think that you can be upset that Sean Strickland lost that fight. That fight was extremely competitive and close. And so, more to the point, no one wants to watch that. But Mike, it sounds like we're going to get it because Dana White this week has come out and said Sean Strickland is fighting the winner. It'll be a rematch either way for him. If DDP was out there, he gets a chance to avenge his loss. If Izzy wins, he gets to, run the belt. But is that the case, Mike? We've talked about this a little, and this is something that's been one of the more fascinating pieces to this fight for me. If DDP wins, sure, the Strickland rematch is there. I think no one will deny that. Is it the case if Izzy wins? If Izzy wins, are we running into Strickland versus Adesanya 2, or are there other options on the board for Izzy?
I mean, there's certainly other options on the board. If Khamzat beats Whittaker, that's a huge option. That's a fight that Izzy hasn't had. But at the same token, it is about as risky of a fight as you can make, because if this fight doesn't happen in Abu Dhabi or Saudi Arabia, you're risking this fight just not happening at all. And even if you are able to book that fight in either of those places, it is still a viable risk that Khamzat just doesn't show up to fight. And it's whether he gets sick or there's some sort of issue, it just seems like this man cannot get inside the cage. And as much as the UFC has tried to give him this chance to earn his way into a title fight, for one reason or another, whether he just missed weight for the Nate Diaz fight or couldn't make it to the Bobby Knuckles fight, whatever it may be, it's so risky putting him into a title fight. And I think the UFC is sort of looking at that. And if Izzy goes out there and beats DDP and Whitaker somehow beats Khamzat Chimaev, there aren't going to be a lot of people that are going to be excited to see Izzy Whitaker 3. I'm actually one of those people who would be excited to see it, because I even said after the second one, I kind of want to see what it would look like if these three fought again, if these two guys fought for a third time. But I don't think a lot of people would join me in that sentiment, and that's totally understandable and fine. But I kind of feel like Sean is just in a great spot right now, and it's very rare that when you sit out and you let these big fights go through, that you can kind of float your way right back into a title fight. I think Sean's got a case here. There's not a lot of times where I hear Dana say, yeah, he's next with that confidence. And he is saying that about Sean Strickland, that Sean is the number one ranked guy. He's trying to put his own rankings over. And I think he's going to get it, because you want to know why more than anything, Jed? He's going to be there. The dude is going to show up. They could book that fight 2 weeks after UFC 305 and Sean will be there ready to go. So I think it's as safe as you can get. Plus, Sean is a star. Sean is getting over. He's got a huge fan base, and you can put this fight anywhere and Sean will be essentially the A side. So I think it makes sense, and it actually kind of works out good for Sean. Got a history of both guys.
Well, Mike, Dana can't put his own rankings over because he's already established that they're trash. Because in the UFC rankings, John Jones is number 3 pound for pound. And as we learned this week, if you don't have John Jones as the number 1 pound for pound fighter, you aren't worth the oxygen you require to breathe, per Dana White. So Sean being the number 1 contender in middleweight is meaningless, per Dana White's own sort of words there. But you didn't say the name I was hoping, Mike, because I've been harboring not a dream, but kind of a belief that this is where we're going. If Izzy reclaims the belt, Alex Pereira is not fighting Magomed Ankalaev. There is a light heavyweight fight coming up, Magomed Ankalaev, Alexander Rakic, which we would presume is a title eliminator of sorts. But Pereira is open. There's not a lot happening for him. There's rumors that maybe Tom is happening, but that doesn't feel like there's a ton of momentum for that bout to occur. So I ask you to kind of drill down on this before we get to predictions and do all this. What's the chance that if Izzy wins, his next fight is not even defending his belt, but is moving up in a trilogy bout with Alex Pereira for the light heavyweight title?
50-50? This is all going to hinge on
odds.
This is all going to hinge on whether or not Conor McGregor fights in December, because this is the backup plan. We're keeping Alex Pereira on ice. We're keeping him on the sidelines. And if for some reason they can't get Conor and Chandler on this December card, they're going to call Alex Pereira and throw him in there with whoever is ready, whether it's Izzy Adesanya, whether it's anybody else. Magomed Ankalaev could turn around quickly if he wins in Abu Dhabi. If he makes quick work of Rakic, maybe he could turn right around. Hey, you want your title shot? Turn right around and fight this dude. Or if Izzy wants to go up and try to make history, dude's put on some weight. He's definitely been clanging and banging over there. He looks a lot different. Put on a bunch of size. I think he'll be better suited for the weight class than he was when he fought Jan Blachowicz. So it would make sense. They need to build this December pay-per-view to be gigantic, because let's be honest, this is one of their tentpole events every year. It's been pretty rough the last couple, between the interim light heavyweight title and everything that happened there to what happened at the end of last year, UFC 296, with that pretty awful to watch Leon Edwards, Colby Covington fight. I think you need something big to lead into 2025. So if it ain't Conor and Chandler, I mean, Alex Pereira, Izzy 3 for the light heavyweight title is pretty big. It's pretty big.
It's really big. You just made me remember the Leon Colby thing and how like that was such a, we're doing this fight. Like not to the extent of John Stipe, but like, no, Colby's fighting Leon and he's doing it at this big pay-per-view. It's like, that fight's going to be terrible and everyone in the world knew it, but God, we forced that issue down your throats. I hope that I'm right, because that would be pretty cool. And I do think there's a very high likelihood if Izzy gets it done on Saturday that the name we hear coming out of his mouth is not Sean Strickland. It is talking about Alex Pereira. But will he get it done, Mike? That's the kind of critical question. It's the question that's come to us at this point in time because I'm going to ask for your prediction. Now, there's still some stuff to come, and you can reserve the right to change this if you need, based on the weigh-ins, etc. But give me your thoughts on how this fight looks and who ultimately leaves the cage Saturday as the UFC middleweight champion.
I got to tell you, and I teased on BTL because I think it was Chase who believes this fight could underwhelm. And I think you said that there's a decent chance. I think this fight is going to slap. I think these two are going to beat the hell out of each other. This is going to be an absolute war because as you've said many times, which is one of the big reasons, Jed, that you've wanted to see this fight, is that when you have a guy like DDP and his style and how aggressive he is, yet tactical, you have Israel Adesanya who, when he fights somebody who forces the issue, he becomes fun Izzy, the guy who just mollywopped Derek Brunson, the guy who knocked out Robert Whittaker to win the interim belt, that guy who knocked out Paulo Costa and knocked out Alex Pereira. When you get a guy that pushes forward and that is going to attack you, that's when Izzy is at his best. Now, Sean Strickland, you can make the case, went after him, but Sean just kind of dinged him in the first round. I don't think Izzy really recovered from that. And Sean was just on one, and the momentum just went downhill for Sean Strickland. But for the most part, when you have a power puncher, a guy that poses a big, dangerous threat, hey, even the dog agrees with me, then Izzy fights more exciting. It just becomes a more exciting, thrilling affair. And that's what I think is going to happen here. I do have questions. A layoff for Israel Adesanya is perfect because he has a million fights and he's been one of the most active guys in the UFC. I feel like we can't go 3 months without seeing him on a fight poster. But now he's had almost a year off. He seems like in a good headspace. Yes, he is repeating quotes that he has rehearsed multiple times to multiple media outlets. Did it again at Media Day. We're getting pieces of that Israel Adesanya back, but we're not getting like cheesy quotes. We're not getting the frozen like Elsa's or anything like that. He seems really good.
To make that one work.
He really tried. He tried for like 8 straight fights and it just didn't go, man. It just didn't go. He just seems so focused. There's a different sort of relaxed energy to him heading into this fight. And there's a different sort of a confidence bringing from him. And then you have DDP, who, speaking of confidence, this guy's confidence at an all-time high, and he's just a brute in there. And as you say all the time, sometimes you just got to push forward and swing as hard as you can. And that's why, in my opinion, DDP beat Sean Strickland, because he just hit him harder and he just looked like he did more damage than Sean Strickland did to him. And that's the kind of style that DDP brings to the table. Not to mention, even though DDP is going to look like he's gassed 7 minutes into the fight, and we're going to talk, I'm sure the commentators are going to mention, yeah, he looks tired. The dude ain't tired. The dude's breathing just fine. It's just some sort of thing that he does, and he could still bring it for 5 rounds. He did it against Sean Strickland. If you go back and rewatch it, that was a gritty battle, and he got through and looked fresh as a daisy when it was all said and done. Looked a little beat up, but looked fresh. So I think this is going to be real close. I think both guys are going to have their moments. I think Izzy's going to maybe sting DDP a couple of times. I think he's going to have a ton of openings to land some big shots, but DDP is just a weirdo, man. He's going to get hit. He might get wobbled a little bit, but that's probably just going to make him matter. So I think in the end, for the second straight DDP fight, I think we're going to take a little trip to Splitty City, and my pick is DDP by decision in a tremendous fight that lives up to the expectations. However, from the betting perspective, I have a bet on Israel Adesanya. I'm going to do what I did for 304, which was maybe my favorite bet of the year. I bet Bilal Muhammad plus 5.5 points. Boy, was that a great bet. Doing it again here, and I'm getting plus 135 on Israel Adesanya plus 5.5 points. That's where I'm going.
A little points bet. Okay. I got a lot of thoughts on this fight, but I'll try and condense them to the sort of easiest ones. First is, I've thought DDP would win this fight for some time, but that was more just vibes. Like, I just kind of wanted it. DDP has quickly become like one of my favorite fighters because he's very silly. And I think I found the correct approximation. He is a combination of Justin Gaethje and Yoel Romero, who are 2 of my favorite fighters anyway. And so you put them together and you get this dude who's like really smart tactically, who is very clearly game planning specific things for fighters and making in-fight adjustments. Like Strickland chewed him up in the first round, and then Strickland did the same thing for the remaining 4 rounds, and DDP started to make changes and be like, okay, well, sometimes you just got to get hit by this jab, and then I'll just swing really hard as I continue to step into this range and move him backwards. And he is very, very smart, like a physical hoss, not like the most defensively savvy, but good enough, like smart enough, like defensively. Justin Gaethje isn't defensively savvy, but at the same time, he also kind of is. DDP has that where he knows when he just needs to put the full shell up and retreat. And he's super fun and super silly, but mostly I'm picking him to win this fight with a little more confidence now. I wouldn't say I'm betting my house or anything, but I just went back and rewatched a bunch more fights. And if I'm wrong in this regard, I'm wrong. We can talk about it the post show. I think Izzy is cooked at this juncture of his career. He's 35 years old, which is old in general, but it's not prohibitively old at middleweight. But Mike, do you know how many professional fights or not professional, do you know how many sanctioned fights Israel Adesanya has had in his life?
He's had over 100. There's no doubt about it.
He's had well over 100, Mike. It's 145 fights between boxing, kickboxing, MMA, and his amateur kickboxing career. 145 fights in what's basically a 15-year fight career. He basically started when he was 20. I don't know, I'm not a math guy, but 150 fights in 15 fight career, that's 10 fights a year, Mike. And that's not counting the gym wars, the legendary spider stuff that they do at CKB, the street fights or brawl, any of that. This man has so many fight miles on him. And I think we've started to see it show, because you said, and I agree, if he comes out and he fights like he did the first time he fought Robert Whittaker, he is going to kill DDP. It is not going to be competitive. But that is a long time ago. And we've seen over the past several years, Izzy would say stuff. I'm a vampire. I'm going to drink his blood. And then he'll tepidly kick Jared Cannonier for 5 rounds. He has become increasingly less willing to throw strikes or to initiate offense. And that is one of the biggest markers of a fighter who is over the hill. Every fighter in history who has fallen off, they show 2 things. Either their chin goes or their willingness to engage goes. And they can still do it at times, but it's not about doing something one time. It's about consistently doing it. And if you go back and through that lens, you rewatch the Sean Strickland fight, it is telling a really damning story, because he gets jawed by, he's the first dude I've ever seen Sean Strickland wallop and hurt him. It's a clean ass right hand, and credit to Izzy for getting up. But I think 5 years ago, Izzy probably eats that better than he ate that shot there. And the rest of the fight, even when it is so apparent that Sean Strickland has beaten him, is going to win this decision, and his corner is telling him, you got to do more. He is just so unwilling to do more that as I rewatched that fight through that lens, I was like, oh, Izzy's old. He is fight old. And maybe a year off helps him and gets him past that. But if his plan is to just go out there and just try and counter DDP every time he charges in, maybe that works. Sometimes DDP is reckless, but I think DDP is smart enough not to be too reckless if Izzy's not doing anything, and he'll just win on volume. He will win by virtue of doing stuff, because Sean Strickland didn't do a lot. Sean Strickland checked leg kicks, walked forward, and stuck a jab and a teep in Izzy, and that killed him. He had no answers for a very basic offense because he wasn't willing to fight back. And I think, based on what we've seen and kind of my review of this, I think that might just be kind of where we're at with Izzy. And so I'm picking DDP to win a decision that's probably not that exciting, honestly. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that this is the fight that, if you'd asked me about it a year ago, I would have said, is he going to counter him? DDP is going to run in. Havoc will ensue. Who the hell knows what happens? I hope we get that. I think there's a real chance that this is a boring main event, and we're all a little bit sad come the post show. But that's not the only fight. We got a lot of other fights to talk about, Mike. I will say this because I rewatched Strickland fight too, and I still have a lot of the same thoughts I had after watching it live and doing the watch party and such.
but it was a very Tyron Woodley-ish type of performance, wasn't it? Just back against the
Really?
fence, no open space, all of that. It's just going to be real interesting. Like if DDP hits him real hard in round 1 and immediately gets Izzy's respect and Izzy feels it and doesn't like it, is he going to be able to get back into open space? Because like that's his best chance to win this fight. If he's circling around with his back towards the fence, he's going to get wrecked in there. Like that, it's just not going to be a good fight for him. And DDP is just going to 50-40 for him. And it's not going to be pretty. He's going to get battered in there. So I'm real interested to see how much this extra weight is going to help him in that regard. Because you have to believe he's probably going to be up against some clinch situations with a guy like DDP. Is he going to be able to push him off and get back to the center and do what he does best? All the questions I have about this fight are mostly on the Israel Adesanya side, because I think DDP is just leveling up at this point. And I honestly think even though he's the champion right now and he opened as the underdog, I think he's one of the more underappreciated fighters on the entire roster right now. Like, I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. And he goes out there and thumps up Israel Adesanya. I think he gets some of that credit.
Firm agree. It has been deeply fun because, like, again, I think DDP has enormous like flaws to his game, and I get why people are like he's not good, because they're like it's very easy to look at him and be like you're doing bad things, but I do think that he gets kind of underrated because he does a lot of really good things, and if you can't punish the bad things, then it's fine. Like if his opponents can't take advantage of the fact that he swings like drunkenly almost, then it's not an issue. Like it's until someone can make him pay, it's not. And Izzy should be a guy who can make him pay, but I mean, most people thought Robert Whittaker was that dude, and he ran over Bobby Knuckles. So yeah. I am fascinated in the matchup. And
Eric Nixick's prepared for DDP twice because he had Brad Tavares. Mm-hmm. And then that was like the only thing that could really go off of, because he even said, just going back and watching film, you can't just find a body who can mimic what DDP does in there. He's just one of those like enigmas that you can't just be like, hey, Edmund Shabazian, come in here and be DDP. No, you can't do that. You just can't. So the best you could do is go off of what you learned in the Tavares fight. And then he just saw dramatically how much improvements DDP made. So, man, it's such an interesting fight. I can't wait for Saturday.
Very interested. I just really want to see what DDP does. So like I said, I think where he doesn't give credit the most is he has very clearly tailored game plans for fights and for fighters specific. And I don't think anyone really gives him, because he looks so ridiculous at times, no one gives him credit for being as smart as he is.
Dude's getting tasered in training camps. He's getting tasered.
I have said for years that cattle prods are the next evolution. I know that people dunked on that, but look, Sean Strickland backs everyone up. He didn't back DDP up. Why? Because in camp, every time DDP took a backward step, he probably stepped into a cattle prod. You got to train those habits out, Mike. And that's what they've done for a gym that is very unheralded. They've got a champion, and I think that they are producing really interesting efforts from him every time out. But this is the biggest test for them. And so very, very excited about this main event. Let's move to the co-main event, though, Mike, because it's a pretty clear tier drop-off. I like the fight. Kai Kara France taking on former title challenger Steve Erceg, coming back off losing a competitive fight with Alejandro Pantoja. And we're getting a fight that, I want to start here, Mike. What does this fight mean? Like, what's at stake in the co-main event?
I think a ton is at stake. I don't think either guy like gets a title shot with a win, but whoever loses is very far away from a title shot, if that makes sense. Like that's sort of how I feel right now. This division is going through sort of a makeover right now. And with where it's at right now, especially after what happened with Manel Kape and Muhammad Mokaev, like, this is your chance. Like, this is your chance to get ahead, because we know how the UFC has felt about the flyweight division for years. And there was a little bit of a resurgence once Henry Cejudo was the champion, and then we got it with Figgy, and then we got it with Moreno. And then UFC 301 happened. And as much as we enjoyed the Pantoja-Steve Erceg fight, if there's an enjoyable fight that happens, but nobody's there to see it, did it actually happen? And those of us who saw it enjoyed it. It was really great. Pantoja's just unfortunately not like a big drawing star. And there's other guys coming up because we got Tetsuro Taira fighting Brandon Royval coming up. So it's almost like you almost feel like the winner of that fight is most certainly getting the next title shot. And you feel like Urseg's probably out of it, even though he's really close. But Kai France, man, he's just been in a really weird spot. And going back, and I heard Connor say this on No Bets Barred, Steve Urseg's entire UFC run has happened since the last time Kai France has fought. It's crazy. He made his UFC debut a week after Kai France lost to Amir Albazi. And all the wins, the finishes, and even the title fight have all happened since Kai France's last fought, which is absolutely insane. So Kai's got a lot on the line here. He's fought for an interim belt. He got finished by Brandon Moreno. He just lost to Amir Albazi, although I thought Kai France won that fight. But again, scoreboard, he needs this one real bad. And honestly, Steve Urseg, as much as we like to call him Vinny Siggs, and you see a bunch of memes on him comparing him to Steve Carell in The Office and Michael Scott and all that, he's not really a star. Like, he's just not that guy. And in this division, there's just not a lot of guys who, are in a Sean Strickland type position where you can lose a title fight, go get one win, and then find yourself right back in one. I just don't know if Steve's that guy. So he's probably going to have to win like 3 in a row before he gets back to a title fight, unless a guy like Tetsuro Taira wins the belt or something. So I not a lot at stake for the winner, but a lot at stake for the loser, if that makes sense.
He's not a star yet, Mike, but Vincenzo.
Wearing my Vinny Siggs blue polo here.
Exactly. When Steve gets on board with Vincenzo, the name change to Vincenzo Urseg, and the Vinny Siggs thing that we have kind of foisted upon him, stardom is just around the corner. I do agree with you. I think that this is much more you really don't want to lose this one unless this is a significant win. But that being the case, you kind of already alluded to it. What is the path here for Vincenzo if he beats Kai France? Because Kai France has fought a lot of dudes here, and I agree. If he wins this fight, if he loses the fight, I think he's done. Like, he's just never fighting for a belt again, and that's tough. If he wins this fight, though, it's hard to see where he goes specifically because he fought a lot of the other dudes, and he's not going to get right into a title fight. But maybe that could happen for him because the Pantoja thing would be a fresher matchup. Steve just lost to Pantoja. So what does Vincenzo do here if he goes out and beats Kai France? What are the paths forward for him to get those 3 fights and get back into a title fight?
Go fight Amir Albazi. Go fight somebody else.
Fighting?
And
what's Amir Albazi doing?
I have no idea. Or the loser of the Royval Taira fight, fresh matchup. Either one of those is fine. You just got to get reps. You got to keep winning. You got to keep people remembering who you are as a fighter. And then I think the big thing is, as long as Pantoja has the belt, and I think if he fights Royval again, I think that fight goes the same way. I think if he fights Taira, it's interesting, but I just don't know if Taira's ready for a guy like Pantoja. Are you ready? If they go back to Perth, man, I think he's got a chance. If Pantoja's still the champ when they go back to Perth, he's got a shot. But he's got to win this fight, probably one more, and a couple of finishes wouldn't hurt either.
If they go back to Perth, he's for real got a chance. I am very interested to see the pop for Vinny Siggs now as a former title challenger, a guy who is growing in the public consciousness. Hometown boy, co-main event. I wish it was 5 rounds, honestly. This being 3 rounds takes a little bit of the mustard off of it, but let's just dive into the pick, Mike. What's happening on Saturday? Who do you got winning and how?
This fight's a scrap, man. It's going to be fun as hell because I know Kai France knows his back is against the wall in a lot of respects. If he ever wants to get back to a title fight or even, another co-main event spot on a pay-per-view, he's got to win, man. He's got to go in there and win. And I think he's quicker. I think he's a little more athletic than Vinny Siggs, but Vinny Siggs got that sort of answer at 125 pounds. The dude hits like an absolute truck. When he hits you, you feel it. Even Ali Pants felt it when he was getting popped around by Vinny Siggs. And Kai's been dropped and hurt before. So my pick will be, it's going to be a very close fight. I don't know if we go to Splitty City here, but I think it's going to come down to a game of inches. Are we going to favor the quickness and a little bit more volume of Kai France? Or are we going to favor the more damaging shots, the cleaner strikes that Vinny Siggs lands? Ultimately, I land on the latter. Vinny Siggs by decision is the pick, but I think this fight's great, and I'm with you. I wish this was 5 rounds.
Vinny Siggs is my boy. I'm backing him. I honestly think one of the biggest things here is that Kaikara Francis kind of historically struggled with people who are just physically larger than him, and Vincenzo is that. And so I don't think Kai's probably at the tail end of kind of his optimal zone for his career. And he's fighting a dude who's still ascending, who I love his boxing. I think Erceg, sneaky good grappler as well. But mostly I think he's just bigger and a more powerful boxer. And that's going to carry the day. I'm going to back my boy Vinny Siggs by decision. 2 more fights on this main card I want to talk about, Mike, before we get to the peeps. The first one, of course, it's the feature fight. And you could make the case that this should be the co-main event, given the popularity of one of the fighters involved. Dan Hooker taking on Mateusz Gamrot in a lightweight contest. This is a big opportunity for Hooker. He's number 11 in the UFC's rankings. Gamrot's number 5. He went to media day this week and kind of said, hey, man, lightweight's up in the air right now. All the dudes above Gamrot, they've already fought for the belt and lost. They're all on losing streaks. If I beat Gamrot, yes, Sarukian's next in line, but who's next after Sarukian? There's a chance that if I win this fight and do so impressively, my next fight is for the belt. And so, Mike, as the world's number 1 Arman Sarukian fan, let's say Sarukian does get to fight for the title next, which seems like we're heading that way, though some things have been taking place. Is the winner of this fight between Gamrot and Hooker, are they next in line, or are they potentially even fighting Sarukian for an interim belt, depending on kind of Islam's situation?
It's tough to say, man. Like, you got to feel for Gamrot a little bit, right? Because this guy was inserted as the backup fighter for Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira too,
just
right?
They assigned him fighter.
They assign him, you're the backup fighter, which ostensibly means if something happens to either of these two guys, you're in. You're getting the opportunity. And something happened, and instead of calling him, they were like, hey, Volk, why don't you do it? What? Like, it just is insane to me. And then all this time happens, and he's maybe a win away. Arman Sarukian's about to fight for the belt, who, even though it pains me to say this, he has a win over Arman Sarukian, even though he didn't. He now has to fight all the way back against Dan Hooker in a fight that, in my eyes, he gains nothing from. Like, he gains absolutely nothing. He is defending his top 5 ranking, and that's probably it right now, because as much as we want this lightweight division to evolve, as much as we want to move forward with giving the new blood and the new breed their opportunity, it took Arman Sarukian absolutely annihilating Beneil Dariush and then beating Charles Oliveira for him to get there. And Arman had a fight back as well. He had to fight Neto BJJ, and here we are. But I just don't know if he gains a whole lot from this, man. It's a huge opportunity. Dan Hooker's got everything to gain, but Gamrot's got everything to lose too. So there are stakes attached to him. Like, if he loses to Dan Hooker, he's never fighting for the lightweight title. That door is shut. It's locked. It's never, ever going to happen, because if it hasn't happened by now, it just is in a really tough spot right now. So no, I don't think he gets that. Will he get maybe an Oliveira fight or get a bigger name? It's not going to be Dustin Poirier, because I don't think that's the type of fight that Dustin Poirier is going to get up for. Could I see Justin Gaethje fighting Mateusz Gamrot sometime next year when he's ready to come back? Sure. Which I actually think is kind of a smart fight for him, because he's a very good defensive wrestler, and Gamrot's probably not going to clobber him like Max Holloway did. So it might be like one of the safer fights he could take at lightweight. So maybe he gets a bigger name. Maybe it gets him to 1 win away. If Arman beats Islam and wins the belt, and they don't decide to run it back and timing works out, maybe they run a rematch as like a co-main event to a gigantic fight. But I'm going to say a win here doesn't get him a title fight next. It's unfortunate. It's not really fair, but just based on how the UFC has sort of handled the booking and just where he's at in a meritocratic world, I don't think they're just all that excited about him. So I don't think they put the promotional push behind him. I think he's fighting just to keep his spot in the rankings, and Dan Hooker can take it and just end his title hopes altogether on Saturday.
I think I disagree, because I don't think he's just fighting to keep his spot in the rankings. I do think that a win over Dan Hooker in concert with the rest. He's on a 3-fight win streak. There'll be a 4. It's like the best in the like ranked dudes that aren't Islam basically at that point in time, and Arman, the two guys who will be fighting. I think a win puts him in the, if something happens, if Arman can't go, if something happens to Islam and Islam can't go, they want to do an interim. I think it kind of puts him in the conversation of, okay, you may be called to serve if you are ready to answer the call. And if it doesn't, I do think the winner of this fight either way is in that situation. If Dan Hooker beats Gamrot, I think similarly. The issue is, I think if Dan Hooker wins, there are other fights that make sense. A Poirier rematch would be great. A Justin Gaethje fight would be great. Gamrot's not going to fight Poirier. Their teammates, Gamrot is like the dude he trained with to fight Islam. That won't happen. Gaethje maybe, and I would love that fight, but I could also see Gaethje being like, I'm not interested. I think the winner of this fight is getting Charles Oliveira in what will very likely then be a number 1 contender matchup at that point. So I do think that's pretty significant. And frankly, I would love to see it. I would absolutely love to watch Gamrot fight Chucky Olives. And if Hooker beats Gamrot, I would absolutely love to see those two dudes get after it, because it'd be fun as hell. But who is going to get that opportunity, Mike? Because we got one more fight I do want to touch on before we get to the peeps. So give me your pick and prediction for this fight.
It's Mateusz Gamrot by decision. Dan Hooker's a underrated defensive wrestler, but Gamrot is probably an underrated wrestler and grappler in his own right. And there's a very real chance that he just puts Dan on his back and just kind of tackles him for 15 minutes. I do think it's a little bit more exciting. I do think Gamrot's going to take a few more risks here, considering what he could potentially gain from this. But in the end, it's going to be a tough fight, man. I could see a world where Gamrot just has like 8 minutes of control time in the first 2 rounds, and then Dan Hooker just doing Dan Hooker things in round 3 where he pours it on, maybe has Gamrot in a little bit of trouble, and it's a super close fight. And it's one of those ones where Gamrot wins, but Hooker's stock maybe goes up a little more because he battled through the adversity and is just such a dog in there. So I think Gamrot by decision is the pick. But hey, there could be a world where Hooker just bites down the mouthpiece late in round 3 and just does Dan Hooker things, man. He's tough to get out of there. I don't think Gamrot finishes him, but I think Gamrot hangs on to win.
I'm going to get spicy. I'm going to pick Dan Hooker to win. Won't at all surprise me if what you say happens, but I do think Hooker is a very good defensive wrestler. Gamrot is not Islam. He's not nearly as good at kind of holding position and sort of advancing into those. I think Hooker can probably create some scrambles when he does get taken down and make it very hard. And, fire knees, punches down the middle, and just be the all-around better striker. I don't think this will be an easy fight, but give me the upset. Let's have a little fun. Let's see if Dan Hooker, despite being left for dead in 2 weight classes, somehow becomes a top 5 dude just sort of out of nowhere. It'd be awesome. Last fight on the main card we need to talk about, though, and we don't have to spend too much time, but this is a man who merits his own discussion, not just being a throw-in. I am talking, of course, about Tai Tuivasa, who takes on Jairzinho Rosenstruik in just a heavyweight banger. It's going to be awesome. But Tuivasa's on a 4-fight losing streak, Mike. And I've heard rumblings from the fans, not from anybody who matters, but, the people are talking. If he loses to Jairzinho, is this it? Is this it for Tai? And so I ask you, if he loses 5 in a row, is Tai Tuivasa on his way out of the UFC, if not MMA in general?
No, of course not. It's Tai Tuivasa. I don't know if he's in Derek Lewis, Kevin Holland territory just yet, but he's close, where it doesn't matter. Like, it truly does not matter. Like, Tai Tuivasa it was just sad to watch his last fight, but then we saw that he's booked on this card. We're like, yeah, Tai Tuivasa's fighting. Like, he just brings a different energy. His media days are always fun. He's just a fun dude to be around, walkouts, and just everything about him. And plus, heavyweight is awful. It is an awful division. There is not a lot to get behind in terms of, hey, we like or feel any kind of emotion towards any of these fighters. And Tai Tuivasa is one of the rare heavyweights that people actually give a shit about. So, yeah, I don't think he's fighting for his job or anything like that. He might be fighting for the MMA community to be like, all right, I think that's kind of enough, Ty. We've seen you just kind of get knocked out and finish in your last 5 fights. Maybe it's just getting a little sad, but I don't think the UFC is going to be like, nope, we don't want this guy anymore because of the energy he brings and everything else. He's an exciting fighter. Just stop booking him against the Marcin Tybors of the world. Stop booking him against the Sergey Spivaks and grapplers. Like, get him in there with guys like Jairzinho Rosenstruik. Another, like, if you ran back the Derek Lewis fight, is anyone going to be pissed off? No. Just throw him in there with dudes who can throw hands, and that's when you get your best Tai Tuivasa. They've done the right thing here, and I think he's going to win, Jed. I'm just going to throw it out there now. I'm picking him, and I have a bet on Tai Tuivasa by KO TKO plus 260. I think he does a shoey on top of the damn octagon on Saturday night.
I have the exact same bet, and I agree entirely. This is the matchup you want for him. He's had some of these, like Sergey Pavlovich was going to stand and bang, and Sergey Pavlovich is Sergey Pavlovich, so Ty lost that one. But, the dudes who take you down, I don't need to see that. I don't need, if Alexander Romanov beats Derek Lewis, I don't need to see Romanov versus Tai Tuivasa.
No.
I'm good. But Tai Tuivasa versus Robles Despan?
Yes, that's the fight they should have
sign
made.
me right on up for that. Like, I am very much on board for this man to just throw hands with any other big fella out there who wants to throw them hands. And maybe he can be the man to finally end our long national Waldo Cortez Acosta nightmare. I don't know. Maybe he can't. I guess we'd find out. But I don't think he'll get walking papers. I assume he will still want to fight. But I saw a surprising number of people being like 5 in a row. Is that just it for Ty? And I think like you said, I think they'll let him stick around, especially because I think he's got a very good chance of beating Jairzinho. Wouldn't totally shock me. You can never be surprised if someone on a 4-fight losing streak goes to a 5-fight losing streak. But Rosenstruik is going to get in there and throw it with him. And historically, we've seen Ty have the more substantial chin than Rosenstruik. So we'll see how that goes. All right.
They have like 35 heavyweights. They have like 35 heavyweights in the roster.
Yeah,
they
but Ty keeps losing. But Ty keeps losing. I mean, he hasn't fought like... No, but Andre Arlovski also snuck in some wins there because he's a hero and a king. Tai Tuivasa, re-sign Andre, and let's do that. Let's do the Andre Arlovski rematch we've all been asking for. Andre Arlovski famously lost to Ty. All right, get your questions in, but before we answer that, fire questions in because Mike, we do this every time. You do it usually. I need a low-key banger because the front four, like the big four are there, and then the main card fight between Li Zhangli and Carlos Prates, that's just going to be really, really fun. The rest of the card is certainly a little thinner, as we've alluded to. So what is your low-key banger of the evening?
Oof, I mean, it's kind of tough. I mean, Leach and Prates is, but that's too easy.
That fight's going to be fun.
That's going to be fun. I don't think Tafa Walker is going to be fun. I think Walker's just going to.
It will either be cool or awful.
Yeah, I think we're bordering awful. I think Culibao Ramos will be fun, but I'll go Casey O'Neill, Luana Santos. I think Casey O'Neill needs to go back to Casey O'Neill. Like this, Casey O'Neill kind of got the Ronda Rousey thing going where she just started falling in love with her striking a little bit too much, and she did it it's just like the worst time. When she fought Roxanne Modafferi, that's when she really started to fall in love with her striking. And from there, she just continues to want to strike with everybody, including Jennifer Maia. And she has gone away from what has brought her to the dance, which is take you down, smother you, and just beat the holy hell out of you. That's what has made her. That's why I was so high on her, because she was relentless. She had a gas tank for days and she tortured you in there. And we haven't seen that from her in a while. Now, it seems like she's made a little bit of a camp switch. She jumped over with Fight Ready, which isn't a bad idea. Like Extreme Couture is a great gym. Eric Dixix, obviously, you guys know how I feel about him as a head coach and as a person. But sometimes you just need a change. And if you want to get back to being a grueling, torturous takedown artist that can deliver punishment, there's far worse places you can go to train in the United States than Fight Ready, because they have produced a lot of those absolute demons in there. And I think Casey kind of needs to go back to square one. So Luana Santos is no pushover. She has taken this fight on short notice. I think she's the favorite, and I don't really disagree with that. I think she's got a lot of momentum right now, but a lot on the line here for Casey O'Neill. Really, truly is. And she gets sort of a hometown fight, gets to fight in front of her fans. And this is a winnable fight for her. So I didn't like what I saw in the last fight, but I think the camp switch, she goes back to sort of her old ways. I think she wins. So I'm interested to see if she could do that.
Love the shout out. I have a bet on Casey O'Neill. Her back's against the wall here. I think a third loss in a row. It doesn't bounce her from the UFC, but that's pretty bad when you've got a young prospect coming up. 3 in a row is really, really tough to overcome. Very, very good scrap. I got to go with my boy. I don't think this fight will be particularly fun because it will probably be over fairly soon. But Tom Nolan was my favorite prospect coming off last season of the Contender Series. If I could go back and redo it, he probably wouldn't be my favorite because there's some other dudes that I was also high on who have been more impressive. But he had a very tough draw his first UFC fight and still has some limitations, but dude's got a lot of physical gifts. And Alex Reyes, the brother of Dominic Reyes, is not very good at fist fighting. So Tom Nolan's probably going to knee him into unconsciousness, and it's going to be really cool. And so I got to support my boy because I have a lot at stake backing Tom Nolan. So I want him to continue to do well. So I look like I know what I'm doing. Casey, get on in here. Although also shout out to Song Kanan and Ricky Glenn, which I think is fun, even if it's not like a fight anyone
Ricky
will
Glenn
care
fighting
about.
at welterweight is super weird, is it not?
It's very weird. What is also weird is that Song Kanan fought Israel Adesanya at one point in MMA. I don't know if you know that, but it's weird. A lot of weird things are happening on this fight card. We got 4 brothers. I have a gimmick parlay fading the bad brothers functionally, except for 2 of the brothers are fighting each other. So I picked Tafa because I think Junior Tafa is better than Justin Tafa. Though I'm not 100% on that. And Walter Walker is definitely worse than Johnny Walker. So a lot of weirdness going on in this card. Casey, before we get to the peeps, what's your vibes? How are you feeling about 305?
I actually, yeah. I don't know. I think Heck made a good point about last week's card. I think I don't have a chance to anticipate any what's the word? I never missed cage fighting. I guess it's because it's always there, so I just never miss it. And I think this is a card. If they didn't run last week's card, I'll kind of have a bigger craving for it. But right now, it just feels like okay, another fight card. This one's in Perth. Cool, good main event. Let's see how stupid it gets during the press conference. Basically, that's where I'm at.
The presser is always one of those things that does kind of liven up anticipation. We'll see. There is also, and I know that this is really the reason that's doing this. We're all just so excited about PFL 8 on Friday that we're really focused on the Impa Kasanganay Josh Silveria rematch. It's the fight we all wanted. So I get it. That's kind of soaking up all the energy in the room. But when that's over, 305 full steam ahead. It'll be great.
But when the main event walks out, I know I'll be hyped. So that's all that really matters. But until then, yeah.
I mean, I'm going to be pumped by the time the main card starts because Li Jiangling, Carlos Prates is just like that fight is going to be fun because Carlos Prates is a lunatic. So it'll be awesome.
Yeah. All right. Let's get some super chats in first.
Spencer Rudimenter. Curious, boys, if Izzy wins, this one becomes a 3, or if Izzy wins this one, he becomes a 3-time champion with 5 title defense streak. Would you put him top 10 pound for pound all time? I think yes, but it's close. Mike, if he wins this one, where does that kind of put Izzy as an all-time great?
I don't know if he's top 10. It's close. Like he makes a case, I think. This is something I'd really have to think about. But I would feel comfortable saying 12 to 15 best. Top 10s. I mean, there's a lot of great fighters out there, like a lot of them.
He's not top
2
10,
of them, I just don't think he's there.
Yeah, he's not top 10. That like it's easy to say that because it kind of does feel reflective like, oh, this is like one of the best careers ever. And it is, but like every time someone throws this out, I'm just like, yeah, they're not. Just my reflexive answer is no, because your top 10 includes and must include, unless you are a total bozo, George St. Pierre, Anderson Silva, Demetrius Johnson, Jose Aldo. Like that's 4. If we're including the women as well, Valentina Shevchenko, Amanda Nunes, Chris Cyborg, like those are no doubt about it. If you're just talking men, those 4 you cannot not have in that. And then that's still not including Habib, who kind of probably has to be in there. Fedor, like there's just so many. And so I think that this puts him, if he wins it again, it will be a unique thing. I don't think that he needs it because I do think he's probably already established himself as a top 20 all-time male MMA fighter. Winning the belt again maybe does put him at 15, but it'd have to kind of really set out the list because like Matt Hughes is an unbelievably good MMA fighter that no one ever talks about anymore. Like just no one ever talks about Matt Hughes, who is the second best welterweight of all time. I'm sorry, Kamaru Usman. I know that there was some weird idea that you were the best welterweight ever, which was insane for a minute. Matt Hughes is like there. Kamaru Usman, like very arguably has a better career than Izzy, though it's not like that's not set in stone. Max Holloway, if Max Holloway is in the top 15, I'm pretty sure at this point. So there's just so much competition. It puts him in the conversation for 15. It wouldn't be insane for you to have him top 10, though I do think it would probably be incorrect.
Is he already cemented as the second greatest middleweight ever?
I believe so, yes.
That's in cement. Okay, just double checking. Where we're
I
at.
believe so, though. You can convince me of arguments. He has a very clear advantage in that contest, though, because like other dudes who could make a claim, and you see this with others, like Dustin Poirier has a great career and is an all-time great lightweight. There's also a big chunk of his career that was at featherweight, and you can't ascribe the featherweight wins to his lightweight resume. Like Dan Henderson, honestly, maybe has like a more substantial or significant like record or like resume than what Izzy has done, just pillar to post. But he did it in multiple weight classes. There's a whole bunch of other stuff going on there. Izzy, I think, is pretty clearly had a more substantial middleweight run than him. So I think he's number 2.
Yeah. And Izzy's
super chat on the other side of this? Is there if Izzy loses super chat at all? Because if not, I want to pose a question to Jeff and you.
Did I get it, Izzy? No, go for it. Oh, wait.
If Izzy loses, okay. If Izzy loses, where does he go? Yeah. So I was gonna ask you guys,
Mike,
is he done?
let me ask this just for the podcast.
Yeah.
If Izzy loses, where does he go from here? I kind of think it mentally affects him, but who knows? What do you guys think?
Do you think he retires if he loses this fight?
Casey, what do you think? I think I have my thoughts, but let's hear from you.
If he looks like the same fighter that fought Sean Strickland, the fighter that when it was the 5th round, instead of saying, I'm ready to die in here, I'm just going to back up and watch the last 10 seconds go away and lose this fight rather than just throw haymakers. If it's that version of Izzy, then yes, he definitely retires. And he should retire if that version of Izzy shows up. Now, if he just loses in a dogfight, maybe not. Maybe they'll just shake hands and Izzy will go, man, DDP's one tough MFer. But I think if he fights kind of how he fought Strickland, just not there. And that's how I feel about that fight too. I'm big. I think just Izzy had a very bad off night, and Strickland had his best on night, I guess. But maybe I'm not giving Strickland enough credit. Maybe I'm giving Izzy too much credit. But that's kind of my thinking going into this fight.
My answer is always no. Fighters don't retire. I would be very surprised if he lost and retired in the cage. My best guess is if he loses, like Casey said, depends on the manner. But if he loses, I think that it'll be a okay, I'm going to wait and sort of see what things happen. A little Dustin Poirier-ish. I don't want to fight for no reason, but I do want to fight at some point, but I want the fight to be something I'm interested in. So he'll just kind of wait around and try and pick a spot that seems good. Or he just decides, hey man, I really like fighting. I've been doing it since I was 19 years old and I have 146 of them now. I'd like to get that number to 50 or whatever it is. So I don't think he'll retire. He may take some more time off and be much more selective moving forward, but I think that's true anyway. I don't think we're going to see Izzy fight 3 times a year like we saw from basically his entire career up until this point. That seems that's probably done.
Well, I guess can Izzy be the type of fighter to fight and acknowledge I'm not the best in the world? I'm just a really good fighter.
I think so.
I'm kind of going. I'm just going to use Arlovsky for example. Arlovsky obviously was a champ, but then fought most of his career aware of who he was. Do you think Izzy can kind of just do kind of big money fights, I guess, knowing he's not the best?
Yeah, I don't think he can do it in the same way Arlovsky did it, where Arlovsky, like, part of the reason I respect him so much is Arlovsky had the self-awareness to be like, I'm not remotely the best heavyweight in the world. I have very clear flaws, and I'm not even really going to put a title run together, but I can make a lot of money if I learn to defend myself properly. I don't think Izzy has that kind of brain chemistry into him, but you've even heard him talk about it kind of since losing the belt this time around and sort of where it goes. It does feel like he exercised a lot of his demons with the Poatan win, and that winning the belt is nice. It means more money, but he's kind of said in the build up to this, I don't really care that much about the belt. I just want to beat guys who beat me. And I think he could pretty easily transition to, I just want to have good fights against dudes who I'm interested in. Maybe that's up at light heavyweight. And I say, I just try and run it back with Jan, or I try and compete against some of the other people there at 205. I think he can be comfortable competing without the dichotomy of belt or nothing.
Yeah, I just don't know what, like, it's going to be interesting. I don't know what, like, the big money fights are. It's just going to be weird living in a world where his best fight offer is Brendan Allen. You know what I mean? When it comes to, like, rebuilding in middleweight.
But that's the thing. That's rebuilding in middleweight. If he says, I'm going to go up to 205, he can get a top 5 guy at 205. Like, if they bumped him up, he could fight Nikita Krylov. And if he beats Nikita Krylov, as long as Pereira holds the belt, that's still around kind of regardless of what happens at middleweight if he actually moves up to 205. So I think we'll continue to see him compete unless he just starts looking really, really awful.
All right.
That's all he knows, man. He's been fighting 10 times a year for 15 years.
That is such a wild statement that so few people in the world can really relate to fight at that level for that long. So just like a handful of people in the entire world have anything sort of the same experiences that Izzy has.
Only kickboxers fight with that frequency, and it's just still like, it's just 15 years, 10 fights a year is a categorically insane thing to do. Like, that is so outrageous.
Yeah, but back to Izzy retiring, like it was always kind of a big red flag for me when he released the documentary, which I haven't seen yet. Apparently, it's coming out on Apple TV later this month. But the documentary, it ends with the Pereira knockout, right? It doesn't. It's not. It was before the Strickland fight. I'm 100% right on that.
I haven't seen it.
No, but it was released before the Strickland fight. So basically,
that sounds right. Yeah.
But Izzy was always very kind of like, this is my story. This is my story. But then he ended the story when he beat Poatan for the knockout.
Yeah.
So
I mean that's where you end the story in the Disney movie.
Yeah,
you know?
and I feel like that was just for Izzy, like he had like his. I believe it's very mental of him. Like he has to be ready to rewrite or start this new story, start this new journey, because he made a movie. He ended the story. That was kind of what he wanted to do. So I just think that's really the psychology of Izzy, and what he's wanted to do his whole life, and I think it's just interesting. And I'm very fascinated by this fight, especially if he loses. Honestly, what's he gonna do, and how he loses if he loses?
Dude, what do you do when you what does the dog do when he catches the car? Most of his combat sports career, there has been the specter of Alex Pereira and the losses hanging over it. And then he comes to MMA and then he loses again. And then he finally gets retributed. Like he finally clears that up and does it in a spectacular fashion. Like, yeah, it's pretty, it's very understandable to sort of lose the plot after that.
Yeah. So,
and then you're asked to fight Sean Strickland. Like, okay, sure, man, cool.
Yeah, then you just get rocked in the first round. You survive, and then and then we're here a year later.
Jabbed to death.
Yeah. All right, thank you much, Beast Man.
I still can't get the end of that fight out of my head. Like straight up, that's why I'm picking DDP. Izzy having lost that fight and Strickland being like, let's go. And Izzy just running away for the last 10 seconds of a fight he was 100% losing. Like I genuinely can't not think of that visual of him be like, I don't want it. I don't want the Sean Strickland smoke.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. Like, that's why it's in his head in a sense, but I don't know. It's fascinating. It's fascinating.
It's a really fascinating fight, man. I really like all angles. Chase, super chatting in. If Hooker wins, I want to see Gaethje versus Hooker. They'll likely beat what's left of each other's careers out of the other. We kind of touched on this a little bit, Mike. In the ranking or the pantheon of potential Dan Hooker fights, should he become victorious, where does the Gaethje fight rank amongst them?
I honestly don't think there's a clear winner. It's him. It's either Gaethje, Oliveira, or Poirier. It's all going to depend.
Those are
on
pretty
time.
clearly the three that would happen.
It's those three. Now, how excited would Dustin be to beat a guy that he already beat, which arguably was Hooker's probably the best performance of Hooker's career?
Was up until this point, yes.
It was the best performance of Dan's career, and he lost, but it was the best performance of his career. I don't know how excited Dustin would be to fight Dan again when he may only have 1 or 2 fights left in his career. I don't know if that one does it. I don't think Oliveira is much of a choice. So I'll say Oliveira. All right. So Oliveira is probably the most realistic if he wins. Gaethje would be number 2 if Hooker waits till 2025. And then I would say Poirier is not happening.
But what's the one you want the most of them? It's the one you want, not realistic. Magic wand. Which one would you want the most to see booked?
I mean, it's probably Gaethje because Oliveira will probably. I mean, because if Oliveira gets fights at the mat, Dan's in trouble, like real big trouble. So I'll go Gaethje. I mean, Gaethje's always going to be the answer, no matter what.
It's really hard to go wrong with picking Justin Gaethje. I will make the brief argument though that like I would love to see it, but I kind of think Justin Gaethje would kill Dan Hooker. I am convinced Dan Hooker's chin is gone and we just won't know it yet. I think there's a world where Poirier would run this fade back, particularly because he's boys with Gamrot. If Hooker like hits a flying knee and sends Gamrot to the shadow realm, Poirier wants an excuse to fight again. Like he is looking for an excuse to fight again. His buddy gets hurt, gets got. It's a fun fight. That was one of the fights of the year that year. I don't think it actually was fight of the year, but one of the fights of the year, fight of the night. You could convince me that he could run that back, but I would also, any of them. There's no wrong way to eat that Reese's. If Dan Hooker gets this win, any of those fights rules, and I would be happy to see any of them.
Yep.
Mr. Heck, if Hooker does win spectacularly, flying knee knockout when Gamrot shoots in, what will Hooker need to do in the post-fight interview to do the thing?
Just be Dan Hooker, man. Like I don't expect him to shit on Justin Gaethje's family or anything. Just go in there and be like, yo, Justin, let's tear it up. Like that's all he needs to do. Just be fun, smiley, now full of tattoos, Dan Hooker that everyone has grown to love and respect. Like just be a dog, be that dog, and then just make a good call out to one of the 3 guys that you've already been planting seeds to fight. Don't call for a title shot. That would not be doing the thing. But as
Okay,
long as he stays away from Islam and Arman Sarukian and just goes for those 3 dudes, he has done the thing. But just do it like Dan Hurka would do it. Don't try too hard.
Okay. So
Just
3
pick
options.
one.
Yeah. Pick one. Okay.
Just pick one of. It doesn't matter which one, but pick one of the
He won't pick.
options.
He won't
and
pick
stay
one. He'll pick all
lame.
3.
No, but it's so lame. Pick one. Put it out into the world. The thing that you want.
He's gonna go.
Why do you
He's
think
gonna
I'm
he's
sitting
gonna
here
go
telling people I'm taking the MMA hour? Because you gotta say it.
All right. Super chat from our wonderful friend Chase.
Chase again. Chase, since we're on the all-time topic. Okay, sorry. Speaking in terms of ability, am I crazy for thinking Prime DC was top 5 all time? Might go as high as top 2, only behind John. Very few could beat Prime DC. I mean that.
There was no
You made
Prime
one-
DC. We never saw
Exactly.
Prime DC.
Exactly.
We never saw Prime DC.
We never got Prime DC, and that's the scary thing. We never got that guy. We got older, veteran savvy DC. We didn't get Prime killer DC, and he was still very, very good.
I bet. I mean, we got some of Prime DC like at the beginning of his UFC run.
At heavyweight? I guess the Frank Mir fight? Or was it? Was it 205?
Very beginning of his UFC run. I think that's the tail end of DC's athletic prime. I get what you're saying. He just came to the sport too late to be like what we would generally think of, where his physical prime meets his skill set. If you wanted to say that he's like one of the most talented fighters you've ever seen, that's not an outlandish claim. I would not agree with it, but no, I don't. Yes, it was very hard, but I'm just never going to pick a heavyweight or a light heavyweight. Their divisions are garbage. So,
DC has to be top 10. Like, he has to be.
I put him
all
top
time in ability or in accomplishment.
Both. I think his resume, even in 2
his
divisions.
His Strike Force run over to the
100%.
UFC.
For sure.
You got to include the Strike Force run too.
10.
You do. Yeah, you include all that. I am deeply uncertain he's top 10 all time in accomplishment, in ability, and like he is extremely talented. I'm very willing to say that. Dude, it's top 10 is just hard. It's just really hard to break into, man. And like DC did a lot, but I don't know. I'd have to suss it out. I'm just not sure I'd put him top 10 all time. Top 20, yeah. Top 15 in the conversation. Top 10 in the conversation. I'm just not certain I'd slot him in there.
Yeah. Man, if I want to rewatch again, I need to rewatch DC versus Josh Barnett for the Strike Force belt. I just remember loving that fight. That was
his first really good performance.
Really good performance, and I was still a relatively young Josh Barnett. Young, not when he's like 40. He's my age now, but he was still, I think, 40 at that time. So a good Josh Barnett. So I really like that fight a lot. All right. One more last super chat before we hit some other questions.
Julian, love the Damn They Were Good podcast. When's the next episode? We've been talking about it. We're going to figure it out. There's obviously some changes coming as I'll be taking over the MMA hour. My time will be a little bit more strapped. But I've been hearing the feedback. There've been a confluence of events for why there haven't been any latest episodes, and we'll figure it out. It will make a return in the not too distant future, but first, we got to get the MMA hour off the ground. The Jet hour is going to be great. You guys are going to love it. And then we'll get onto the dams. Maybe we'll incorporate it. Might be part of the new MMA hour, a dam segment.
All right. I'm going to throw this.
We did a Damn They Were Good on Daniel Cormier. He was very good. We talked all about it.
Prediction from Scott McRae on the main event.
Scotty, I got DDP by second round TKO. If he gets a early stoppage of Israel, I think that people will finally respect him. Like, no one can really, like, there was a little bit of that after the Robert Whittaker where everyone was like, I don't know, he still does a lot of weird shit, but he just killed Bobby Knuckles if he kills Bobby Knuckles and Izzy in 2 rounds, it's going to be hard to deny him, you know?
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be pretty wild.
It'd be incredibly impressive. Like, that will be functionally as impressive as if Ilya goes out here and knocks out Max, and he just knocks out the 2 of the 3 best featherweights of all time. Like, that's unbelievably impressive. If
Oh my God. If
DDP
Ilya
does that to Bobby Knuckles and thing,
yeah,
Jesus.
if Ilya can finish Max, I would just like short circuit my brain. I'll be just like, what is Max doing on the ground, sleeping? It would just.
It will be incredible.
I won't be able to handle it.
Look, Justin Gaethje changes careers. Go look at it. Basically, everyone who's fought him other than Dustin Poirier, and I mean, I would say Khabib, but he did kind of end Khabib's career as well. So, like, everybody who's fought Justin Gaethje has looked not very good after it, other than Poirier.
This is an interesting little prediction here.
Takero Man 91. I got Israel Adesanya will win 3rd round TKO. I think the matchup's tailor-made for him. Grappling may pose an issue, but I think Izzy will be fine. I think DDP is a better Costa.
I don't agree with that.
I gave you the comp. He's Yoel and Gaethje. He is a cross between those two in real weird ways, which is, there's some to that's Costa. But like I said, at prime Izzy, I do think this fight looks like that. Like, it's DDP walking headlong into offense. I don't know. I'm very fascinated to see if prime Izzy's still there. This does, though, raise the good question. We didn't talk a lot about the grappling, but Mike, you did mention Izzy is beefed up a little bit, add a little bit of size here. Do we think that's specifically for the prospect of, kind of DDP's physicality and sort of the grappling that may come? And do you think that is a good idea for him?
Yeah, I mean, I think he just needed to kind of do that anyways. Look, man, I can tell you firsthand, when you get in there and you start lifting heavier and you do it consistently, you really start to like it. And once you really start to like it and you do it more and more, you start to feel better. And sometimes you get into a funk, and sometimes you get into a place where the thing you do and the thing you've loved for the last however long you've been doing it starts to eat at you a little bit. You start to get a little burnt out. And then even on the days that you don't want to go, when you go in there and you lift heavy weights and you get a good workout in, something you aren't accustomed to doing, but then you start to get used to it, you feel better. Like, you just feel better. So I think I think the timing of it is perfect. I think he probably expected to fight DDP after DDP beat Strickland, but I also think that probably started before the DDP Strickland fight happened. There's a lot of changes he's made. I didn't think Israel Adesanya would fall in love with playing golf, but he has somehow fallen in love with playing golf and lifting weights. Like, these are things that he never really did before, but has somehow found a way to like them. So I just think it's a little of column A, a little of column B. Column A, good for his mental capacity, makes him feel better. And then plus, you're fighting a dude that you kind of need to bulk up, beef up for, because he's probably going to put you up against the fence a couple times and try to grind you out at certain points. So, yeah, I think it's good timing for it.
Maybe they go hand in hand, Mike. Maybe he realized he's only driving 220, needs to get a little longer off the tee to be competitive. Hit the old weights, get a little Bryson DeChambeau game going on. just really got to bulk up to make sure he's driving 280 on a carry.
Yep.
When are we swing roundsing with Izzy?
Oh, that'd be incredible.
He can get this work whenever he wants it.
When I heard that, I was like, yep, got to do it. This needs to happen at some point.
He can get this work whenever he wants it.
All right, Brian Tucker. Book 3 economy tickets to New Zealand. Stat.
Yeah. So we're clear.
He'll be in the States at some point.
Oh, gonna stay out. I don't know.
Another segment.
We're going to New Zealand. We're going to New Zealand.
Yeah, come on, let's have fun. The Jet Hour, we've got a good budget for the Jet Hour, and certainly there will be many segments of swing rounds on the Jet Hour. It's going to be great. Just giving Izzy the business on the links. Casey, let's get one or two more, and then let's call it.
All right.
Spencer, back in with another super chat. How do you 3 view Israel Adesanya at this point from a fan perspective? We've usually been a fan, but have to admit he has been a bit cringy these days. this has been one of the bigger topics of the week as well already. It's just what happened to Izzy. Izzy was so very popular on the rise, and a lot of posts. The man's been very online in ways nobody has ever been online in a good way.
Yeah.
Izzy seems to really be in that in some tough ways, and so certainly seen a lot of sentiment turn against him. Casey, let's go to you. Like, how do you feel about Izzy these days? And sort of,
I okay. I just gotta say, as a fan, when Izzy came onto the scene, I was just fascinated by him as a person, his career, just what he was bringing to the sport, as just his personality. But right now, especially online, I wish he did a little bit less is more type of approach. Basically, yeah. Cringy is a very overused kind of term these days, but it's not even cringy. Some of it's just like that's just the photo of the 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 comparison
there's
photo.
a mix, buddy. There's a mix there because there is some cringy stuff and there's some gross stuff and there's
the
some
gross
like
stuff.
what
Just
the
gross.
WTF stuff and some weird stuff. Like he's not a lot of good stuff, just a lot of like weighing in on the Imani Khalif thing and with like the most dipshit opinion of all time.
Yeah.
And then,
That's
the
just
comparison
disappointing.
photo.
Yeah.
And then even dating back to the frozen like Elsa and just trying to dig in on that line. It has been a very strange sort of not fall from grace or fall from stardom. He's still very popular, but it has been real weird, right, Mike? Like to sort of see this happen. I don't even know how to describe what this is, but it's very odd.
What's also very strange about it is Izzy's been around, I think, a little bit longer than people think. And on top of that, we've seen him so many times and we've been through so many press conferences with him. Like even for like probably from like his second fight on, he was like the face of a card, like one of the faces of a card. He was the big guy they were pushing. He was the one doing a lot of the media. He was everywhere for almost his entire UFC run. And what I found sort of interesting since I got in MMA fighting is that the wave of new fans that have come in and the wave of older fans who leave, it's really, really interesting because some of the older fans who, like Casey, saw Izzy from day one and was truly fascinated by him. The newer fans, they never got to experience any of that. They didn't get to experience the early aura of Israel Adesanya. They just came in and saw the frozen like Elsa stuff and they're like, thought this is fist fighting. And I think for Izzy, the time off was warranted. And there is a small part of me that kind of wishes, being one of those people who was always fascinated by him, that he took more time off. Because I say this all the time about certain fighters when you start to cool off. We cannot miss you if you don't leave. And Israel needed to leave, not just for himself, but I think the community with him needed him to kind of part ways from them for a little while. Same thing happened with Colby. We didn't see Colby or hear from Colby in a year. And then he stepped on the scale as a backup fighter. And everyone was like, oh, Jesus Christ, it's Colby Covington. Where the hell did he come from? And then people were like, oh, cool, Colby's back. And then he fought Leon Edwards, and now he kind of maybe needs to go away again.
Now he's doing it again.
Look at him. So, yeah, it's just the fan base, what they expect, what they think the sport is when they come in, and then seeing who he is now. So, like, if you followed him from 2018 on, you have a different perspective on Izzy than if you found him when the pandemic hit, or if you're like a Nelk Boy fan who became a UFC fan over the last 2 years. Like, you have a different view on Izzy than people who, and there's even people who watched Izzy in his kickboxing days and knew who he was before he even coming to the UFC, and his history with Alex Pereira once he came on. Like, it's just different vibes from different people, different fan bases, and some are just a way tougher crowd than others, I would say. And it's in this sport in particular more than any other. So yeah, it's just a mix of things for Izzy. It's like you put them all in a pot, and right now it just seems like the timing for Izzy is just kind of strange in 2024. I'll tell you what will fix everything. He goes out and knocks out DDP. That'll change everything. No one will care anymore. They don't care what he says on Twitter or what he does. He goes out and kicks DDP in the face and knocks him unconscious. He's back, baby. He's back.
I mean, it's just so obvious. It's the same as, look, when you go out, you know, if you take a young lady out for a first date, or a young man, you know, and you hide you're crazy. You don't come out on date one and be like, here's all my insane shit. And you meet that out over time. And then once you're locked in, you're married. Well, you're just stuck with my crazy, so I can be out here and do my nonsense because it's that. And as long as every once in a while you bring home flowers, you have a wonderful touching moment, you knock somebody unconscious in front of the Perth crowd, it's fine. You remind people why they love you, despite you becoming increasingly insane, because you're just being more comfortable being who you are. We all got to hide our crazy. Izzy did it for 30 some odd years, fairly effectively. He's just letting it out now because that's the spot we're in. And that's where we're going to end it, because when you can make a comparison like that, I think that that's a great end point. And we're almost there, guys. 2 sleeps away, 48 hours and some change, and UFC 305 will be underway. MMA Fighting still has coverage coming this week, so keep it locked here. Jose Young's on the ground for the presser, which is happening, in the evening or whatever. The weigh-in's coming tomorrow as well. We'll have a live stream of that. So, Mike, I think you're even on that weigh-in stream, if I'm not mistaken. So we're going to have some
6
fun.
p.m. Eastern.
AK out, and you're just jumping in for your best friend. What a hero you are. So make sure you guys tune into all of that. Keep it locked here on MMAfighting.com. That's Mike Heck. That's E. Casey Leiden. I think I pointed the incorrect directions, but that's fine. The podcast won't know. I'm Jed Meshew. Good night, everybody. Love y'all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.